Hey everybody, welcome back to my garden. So today I thought I would bring you along as I'm just doing some general garden cleanup. It is about mid-November right now, and so now is really the perfect time of the year to be putting the garden to rest for the winter. All of the perennials, especially the hostas, need cut back. There's still a lot of leaves left to fall that are on the trees, so I'm not going to worry too much about getting the beds perfectly spotless. I will rake up the majority of the leaves that I see, but I'm not going to spend too much time on that just because there's still so many to come down. This has been a really weird fall because it's been super warm up until about a week ago when it got really cold really fast. We even got about 6 inches of snow a few days ago, and so it's obviously all melted off by now. But I think that this is probably going to be one of my last opportunities to get out here and get the garden cleaned up. Especially some of like my hostas, for example. After getting 6 inches of snow on them, they look really terrible. So now is really the best time to clean them up. Some people prefer to wait till spring. I personally like to do all of my cleanup in the fall. It really can go either way. I know a lot of really talented gardeners that wait till the spring. I just personally like to have it cleaned up in the fall so that in the spring everything can just kind of wake up and come back to life without there being a bunch of work to do to come out and clean things up. I like to put the garden to rest for the winter looking really clean, and then that means that when there's no snow on the ground in the winter, it still looks pretty reasonable. And then besides that, I also have a few bulbs that I'm going to plant today and just some other general garden maintenance that I'm going to do. So I thought I'd bring you all along, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'm here in one of the flower beds, and I thought I'd show you how I'm going to go about cutting back the hostas and the other perennials. This is the flower bed where I transplanted this lilac back maybe a year ago. And so this flower bed originally was two separate ones. The lawn came all the way back to the fence. But over the summer, I decided that I was going to cut out the lawn and curve it to match kind of the rest of the bed, and then bring the flower bed through back in front of the fence. So that there was a walkway kind of to the fence, but there's no gate or anything, so that was kind of not necessary. But anyway, so all I'm gonna do is just take my pruners and then just take and start cutting this back. This is real super easy. All I'm gonna do is remove all of the foliage and cut it back to essentially nothing. But then that is really all there is to it. And as I'm going, I'll kind of pick up leaves and pull weeds and anything else that needs to come out. But other than that, this is a pretty fast job. So I'm just gonna start working down the bed, and then I will come back and show you what it looks like when I'm all done. Okay, so I've gotten most of my flower beds cleaned up. You can see I didn't spend too much time getting the leaves out. I just kind of came through with the blower quick to get the bulk of them. There's still a ton of leaves to fall, and so I'm not going to worry about really cleaning the beds up now. In fact, that honestly might not even happen till the spring. We're supposed to get a good amount of snow tomorrow. And so then all of these leaves will still need to fall at some point, but if there's snow on the ground, I probably just won't worry about it. But anyway, this is a new flower bed that I haven't shown very much. When we first moved in, the bed was only about 3 feet deep and just went straight along the fence line. This past summer, I came in and cut a curve into it and made it much wider. So now in some spots it's as wide as probably 8 feet. So that significantly increases my planting area, and then also just makes it look a little bit more interesting. I don't like flower beds that are just straight lines. I think they look nicer if you give them a little bit of a curve, so that is what I did here. And then late summer, early fall, I planted a whole bunch of hostas in here. Now those are all cut down now, so they don't look like much, but they're all dwarf varieties that will stay under kind of a foot. My plan is to just fill the front of this bed with a whole bunch of hostas and ferns and make it look really lush and just a ton of shade perennials. And then I've also got a little trio of deer ferns. These guys are evergreen, so I didn't cut them back because they should last through the winter. And then in the spring, they should, just kind of pick back up. I want to plant some stuff in here that is evergreen so that it doesn't look like nothing during the winter. But it is probably going to be primarily a hosta bed. And then behind me, I have a red rooster Japanese maple. And so in the spring, I'm going to come in and plant a little arc of a boxwood hedge. I'm going to keep it real small, so it'll only be about a foot tall and a foot wide. And then the front of the bed will be just all filled with hostas and ferns and stuff like that. And then right now, I'm going to plant 50 of these Narcissus Zit. This is a variety that stays about 4 to 6 inches tall, so it's a dwarf Narcissus, and they are like an all-white variety. Now, these want full to part sun. This is obviously a pretty shaded bed, but in the spring, the trees above me are all deciduous, so they don't have any leaves. So in the spring, this bed is pretty much full sun, so I think these guys will get more than enough sun to keep them happy. And normally, if you've watched my bulb video, you know that when I plant bulbs, I usually use an auger so that I can do it really fast and plant a lot of them at the same time. I'm not going to worry about that for these Narcissus. I'm just going to do it by hand. Because they're so small and there's only 50 of them, I think it'll just be easier and less of a disturbance to the flower bed to just do it by hand. So what I'm going to do is open up my bag and then just kind of toss these randomly throughout the bed around the hostas. I'm going to be careful that I don't dig directly through the hostas, obviously. And then for spacing, some of them are going to be just a couple of inches apart, and some of them will be about a foot. Even with the dwarf varieties like this, I want them to naturalize and come back every year. So I'm going to make sure that they at least have a couple of inches between them. And I'm going to keep them all in the front of this bed, just kind of around these existing perennials. I will go down a few feet in either direction. There's a few hostas off to each side, so these Narcissus or daffodils will be all through those and then a little bit to the edges as well. But so once I've done that, I will come back and then just kind of scrape my bark away and then dig a little hole. I only need to get these about 4 inches below the surface, and luckily this is really easy soil to dig, so I don't think planting this 50 is going to take me very long. And then I'm going to drop in a little handful of Biotone starter fertilizer just to make sure the bulbs get off to a really good start, and then drop my bulb in here and cover back up with soil and then push the bark back. Now, as you can imagine, when I'm planting other perennials in here next year and in the future, I probably will run into some of these bulbs and accidentally dig some up. That's okay. I'm not all that concerned about it. If I lose some down the line, it's not the end of the world. I'm putting enough of them in here that even if I lose some, it shouldn't be a big deal. There should be enough to really keep a nice stand in here. But other than that, I'm just going to kind of get these planted and then I will come back and show you what it looks like when I'm all done. So now I'm just a few feet down from where I planted the narcissus, and I'm going to be planting 50 of these hyacinths. The variety is Excelsior, and I really love this variety because they get long, strappy leaves, and then they have little bell-shaped flowers, about 15 to 20 of them on one stem, and they are really almost a blue color. And they get about a foot tall, and so these bulbs are a little bit smaller than, you know, a tulip or a regular daffodil. And so how I'm going to plant these is a little bit different than how I planted all of the other bulbs so far. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rake back all of the mulch, and then I'm going to dig a big trench and then just dump them all in there. I want these to stay in one big mass, so that it gives you the most impact. I think they will really brighten up this area and kind of tie in with the blue of the fence. And I think you'll be able to see them from across the yard. If I plant them all in one mass planting. I think that if I spotted them through the garden, they would kind of lose them because they are short. They're only about a foot. And so this method of planting bulbs, digging a trench, dumping them all in there, is really good if you're doing mass plantings or if you are going to grow the bulbs as annual. So if you're going to dig them out at the end of the season and then replace them every year, I find that if you put them in a trench, it's easier to find them and get them out. So when I was planting bulbs down in San Diego, where I was growing them as annuals and ripping them out every year, this is how I would do it. I would dig a big trench. So these are hardy down to zone 3, so they're very winter hardy, and they're more of a woodland type bulb. You don't see them all that often. In fact, I've never seen them grown in person. So I'm very excited to have these in my garden. So all I'm gonna do is just start by raking back this bark mulch. I do have drip lines in here that I'm gonna have to be careful of, but that's okay. I ended the narcissus right about here. And so I want the narcissus to just kind of meet the hyacinths. And there's only 50 of them, and they need space about 4 inches. So I don't need all that big of a trench. I'm gonna do my best to not pull out the drip tubes, but sometimes that's easier said than done. And I am gonna take it and just pull it out and pin it into the lawn for just a minute while I dig my trench. And then I'm just gonna take my shovel and cut out an area about this big. I'd say it's maybe 3 or 4 feet, probably closer to 4 feet. And then I'm gonna make the trench about 5 inches deep so that in the end the bulbs end up about 4 inches below the soil. I would say the bulbs are about 1 inch around, so that should be kind of the perfect depth. Okay, so I got my trench all dug, and I ended up making it about 1 foot wider. It just felt a little bit small to me. And now I'm just going to take and dump some Biohome starter fertilizer in here. Oh, that might be a little much, but that's okay. It won't harm anything to have a little much in there. And then I'm just going to take my hand and kind of mix it into the bottom few inches of the soil. Digging this whole trench only took me maybe 5 minutes. So you can see this is a really fast way to plant a lot of bulbs. And then now what I'm going to do is just take and dump my bulbs in. And then I'm gonna go back through and make sure that they are all spaced appropriately. And then I'm going to make sure that the top of the bulb is facing up. With hyacinths, it can be a little bit hard to tell which side is the top. Some of them are pointed like a tulip is, so these ones are real easy. But some of them, like this one, are more round. So what you have to do is just kind of look at the bulb, and then you can usually see which side had roots coming out of it, and that's the side that you put down. If you get it wrong, it's not the end of the world, but admittedly with bulbs like this, it can be a little bit harder to tell. And then the other thing about hyacinths is that some people have an allergic reaction to them. And so it's not like an allergic reaction that's gonna end you up in the hospital or anything, but it will give you some skin irritation. So I always recommend wearing gloves when you're planting hyacinths, at least for the first couple times. I know that I have never had a reaction to it, so I generally wear gloves, but if I don't have them, I don't worry about it. But if you're planting hyacinths for the first time, I definitely recommend wearing gloves. So now that I've gotten them all spaced appropriately, my last step is to just come back and fill in over the top of them. Now when you're planting in trenches like this, it is easy to knock the bulbs over. So what I normally do is just kind of gently sprinkle some soil instead of just pushing the whole pile in. I find that sprinkling a couple of inches tends to keep them in place and keep them upright a little bit better. And now that there's a few inches of soil in there, I'm just gonna take and fill the trench back in. Okay, my next project is planting these 5 Fritillaria bulbs. These are Fritillaria lutea, which is the yellow variety of Fritillaria. And they get about 36 inches tall, so I thought that they would be really nice right next to the patio on this little hill. I think I'm gonna put all 5 of them here. They get quite tall, but not all that wide, so even though it's not a huge area, I think I'll be able to fit all of them. And I really love Fritillaria because you don't see them very often, and they add a very unique look to the garden. They come in only warmer tones. They don't come in like pinks or purples or anything like that. So your options are kind of yellow, orange, or red. I personally really like the yellow ones. And normally, planting something like this, I would use my auger, but I've only got 5 of them, and so I think it's easier to, instead of trying to get the auger out, I'm just gonna plant them by hand. And I'm gonna plant them like I would any other bulb, just by digging a hole. These need to go pretty deep. My holes are probably going to be about 1 foot deep. Maybe not quite that much, but I want them there to be a good 6 inches above the bulb. Now there are some daffodils in this area. My plan is admittedly to just plant these and hope I don't hit the daffodils. But if I do, I can always shift to a different, shift over a few inches to where there isn't a daffodil. These Fritillaria are hardy down to zone 5. They're not as hardy as some of the other bulbs, most of which are hardy down to zone 3. I'm in zone 6 here in Spokane, Washington, so they should be plenty winter hardy for this area. But if you live in a colder area, they might not work for you. And you can see they're pretty good sized bulbs. They're significantly larger than a tulip or a daffodil, and a ton larger than something like a crocus that is really small. So I've got a nice size hole dug here. The bulb is going to end up about that far below the surface, which I think is perfect. And then I'm just going to take some Biotone, mix in a little handful of Biotone, scratch it into the bottom, and then set my bulb down in there. You can see there's already some roots on this guy, so it makes it easy to figure out which side is the top and which side is the bottom. But in case there aren't any roots, the slightly pointed side is the side that you want to put up. So then I'm just gonna nest him down in there, backfill, and then replace my mulch. Just like planting any other bulb. Okay, so the last project that I want to get done today is planting some tulips in a container. This is the variety Hakoon, which is a white giant Darwin hybrid. I've got about 15 extra bulbs left over from when I planted these out in the garden. And so I'm just going to put them in this glazed ceramic urn. I think that the white flowers will contrast very nicely with the greenish kind of blue color of the glaze. So what I've already done is filled the pot about 2/3 of the way up with soil, and then I mixed in a handful of starter fertilizer. The fertilizer is probably not necessary because these bulbs, in all likelihood, will probably just get tossed after they're done blooming, but I mixed it in there for good measure anyway. And then all I'm gonna do is take and dump them all in. I will spend a couple seconds just making sure that the pointed side of the bulb, the top, is facing up. But that's all you have to do. Planting bulbs in containers is super easy, especially if you only fill it part way and then fill it the rest of the way once the bulbs are in here. And because they're in a container and I'm not expecting these to live from year to year, you can put them so close that they can even be touching. And if I wanted to, I could put in some, in the spring, I could come back and plant some pansies or something over the top. If I think about it, I will, but in all likelihood, I'll probably just forget, and they will come and the tulips will bloom and be gorgeous, and then that'll be that. So I've got the bulbs all set up. Let's see if I can show you. All pointed up. I'm gonna have to fix some now that I did that. And then all I'm gonna do is take the rest of my potting soil and just dump it in over the top. Oh. That might be a little much, but I can pack it down in there. So we're supposed to get some rain overnight, so I'm not going to worry about watering these in. If we weren't, I would water them in well now, and then I'm going to place this in a protected location, probably right next to the house. I'm going to keep them outside. I'm not going to put them in the garage or anything like that. But I'm going to make sure that they're somewhat protected, and by that I mean literally just setting them next to the house as opposed to somewhere out in the garden. But other than that, these should bloom super well for me in the spring. But anyway, it is starting to get cold out here, and at some point in this video, I both stepped in dog poop and then ripped my pants, so I'm going to take all of those things as signs that it's probably time to go in for the day. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please make sure you subscribe down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.